You know, way before Columbus ever thought about sailing west, before the word America even existed, there was a completely different world right here. A world that was brilliant, complex, and honestly, so much more profound than most of us were ever taught in school. So let's explore this forgotten metropolis. Okay, so check this out. Around the year 1300, there was a massive city right near where St. Louis is today that was bigger, actually bigger than London was at the exact same time. We're talking a real thriving city right here in the heart of North America.
And that really is the big question, isn't it? If this place was so huge, so important, why has it been practically erased from our history books? How did it become, well, forgotten?
To get to the bottom of that, we've got to go back. I mean, way, way back. Because the story of people on this continent starts thousands of years earlier than we used to think. For the longest time, the story we were all told was that the first people got here about 13,000 years ago. But that whole idea, it's been completely blown out of the water. We now have solid evidence of people in Chile from 18,000 years ago. And get this, in New Mexico, they found perfectly preserved human footprints that are over 21,000 years old. Just incredible. So here's what's so wild about that. It means people didn't just wander across a land bridge into an empty continent. No, they were already here, settled in, long before the glaciers even melted. That one fact, it just changes everything. And after thousands and thousands of years of different societies growing and changing, that deep, deep history leads us to that incredible city we started with, a metropolis built from the earth itself, a place we now call Cahokia. At its height, this city was home to maybe 40,000 people. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. This wasn't some small town. It was a massive urban center. People came from all over the continent to trade, to worship, to live in its giant plazas. And its skyline wasn't stone. It was earth. The people of Cahokia built more than 120 of these huge mounds, all of it by hand. Can you just imagine the sheer amount of work? We're talking millions of baskets of dirt, carried one by one to shape the land into this monumental city. And the crown jewel was Monk's Mound. This thing had a bigger footprint than the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. It soared 10 stories high, a colossal pyramid of earth that you could see for miles and miles around. And you know, they weren't just amazing builders. They were also brilliant astronomers. They built this huge solar calendar out of giant red cedar posts. We call it Woodhenge today, and it tracked the seasons, the solstices, perfectly. This was a society that was deeply connected to the cosmos. And that connection to the cosmos, it wasn't just for show. It was the very foundation of their beliefs, their art, and a vast trade network that stretched across the entire continent. Their whole world was really about balance. On one hand, you had copper, which they got all the way from the Great Lakes. It represented the sun, the sky, and power. On the other hand, you had shell, which came all the way up from the Gulf of Mexico. It stood for water, the underworld, the soul. Fire and water, sky and earth, all held in balance. And what connected this whole world? The Mississippi River. It was so much more than a highway for trade. It was like a spiritual artery, carrying not just goods like copper and shell, but ideas, beliefs, connecting hundreds of different peoples into one vast cultural world. And that network, it created some of the most breathtaking things you can imagine. Like this, in Ohio, the Great Serpent Mound. It's an effigy, almost half a kilometer long, that aligns perfectly with the sun and the moon. It's not just a sculpture, it's like a prayer written onto the landscape itself. Now, by the 1400s, Cahokia itself was already declining, its people moving on. But the cultures it inspired were thriving. And then, everything changed. A catastrophe hit that would unravel this entire world and bury its memory in silence. When the first ships from Europe showed up, the people on board looked out, and they saw forests, they saw plains, and they called it a wilderness, an empty land. They had absolutely no idea they were looking at a civilization. They just couldn't see it. But before any major wars were fought, before any treaties were even signed, something else arrived with them. Something you couldn't see. An invisible enemy that moved faster than any ship or any explorer. 90%. Just let that number sink in. Within about a century, diseases like smallpox and measles, things the native peoples had zero immunity to, wiped out as much as 90% of the entire population. It was an apocalypse, an unimaginable tragedy that left a continent haunted by ghost towns. And the devastation didn't stop with the disease. What came next was a deliberate, systematic effort to erase the memory of the survivors. Children were forced into boarding schools where their languages were forbidden. Their most sacred ceremonies were outlawed. And holy places, places that held meaning for thousands of years, were just renamed, their stories buried on purpose. But here's the amazing part. A story this deep, a memory this strong, it can't be buried forever. Right now, today, something incredible is happening. Science is finally starting to work with ancient memory to bring this lost world back into the light. We have these amazing new tools, things like LiDAR, which can basically see through forests and show us the outlines of entire forgotten cities. We have ancient DNA analysis that confirms an unbroken line of people on this continent going back more than 15,000 years. And finally, places like Cahokia are being recognized by UNESCO as World Heritage Sites, right up there with the pyramids and the Great Wall of China. And this right here might be the most powerful point of all. The scientists and archaeologists, they aren't really discovering anything new. What they're doing is finally proving what indigenous people have been saying all along, in their stories, in their traditions. Science is finally catching up to memory. So it all leaves you wondering, right? If an entire city, bigger than London, could be lost and forgotten for centuries, what other stories, what other incredible histories are still out there, just waiting silently right beneath our feet?